We are factoring once again, but this time we're looking at factoring when there's a value in front of x squared. And in this case, I always start off by looking to see, is there a greatest common factor that I can factor out? And 12, 17, and 6 have no numerical common factors other than 1, and there's no variables that can be pulled out. So that leads us to the fact that we are going to have to be doing some decomposition. So we are searching for two numbers. Those two numbers need to add to give me negative 17, but they also need to multiply to give me A times C, which is 12 times 6, or 72. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to give me 72, but add to give me negative 17. So I have to start looking at the factors of 72. So 72 is 9 times 8. But if I add 9 times 8, I get 17, but I need negative 17. So I'm going to flip the signs of 9 and 8 because negative 9 times negative 8 still gives you a positive 72. But when I add them, I get negative 17. So this case works. Instead of using these and creating factors right away, I have to replace my b value, which is negative 17x, with negative 9x and negative 8x. And it doesn't matter which order you put these two terms in, you will still get the same two factors if you follow the procedure. So now I'm going to drop down that positive 6 and that 12x squared. After that, we're going to split this into two groups, each group containing two terms. So in the first group, we're going to try to pull out the greatest common factor once again. So I have 12x squared minus 9x. Well, 12 and 9 are both divisible by 3, so I would factor out a 3. And then I have 2 x's here and 1 here, so I can pull out at least 1x. And that's going to leave me with 3x times what would give me 12x squared? That's 4x. And 3x times what would give me negative 9? That's negative 3. So we're done common factoring out of the first group, so we need to do the same procedure for the second group. So I have negative 8x plus 6. So in this case, I know both are divisible by 2, so I'm definitely going to factor out a 2. But in this case, because I know the first term has to be positive, I'm going to factor out a negative 2. And don't forget to put your sign here, whether you're adding or subtracting, so whether the value I've factored out is positive or negative. So after I've factored out negative 2, negative 2 times what would give me negative 8x? That's 4x. And negative 2 times what would give me 6? That's negative 3. And if you've done this correctly, you should notice that what you have in your brackets in both the common factoring should be the same. So that brings us to our last step, which is saying that the values that we have left over after taking out the greatest common factor, that is one of our factors, and then the other one is going to be the values that are outside the brackets, or the common factors, and that forms the other factor. So 4x minus 3 times 3x minus 2 are the factors of 12x squared minus 17x plus 6. The only thing that could happen is I could give you a problem like this. And again, we always start by looking at, is there a greatest common factor that I can factor out before doing another procedure? And in this case, 10, 35, and 75 are all divisible by 5. So I would start by factoring out 5, being left with 2x squared minus 7x minus 15. And then I'm going to have to tackle this problem in here using decomposition. So I'm looking for two numbers that add to give me negative 7 and that multiply to give me negative 30. So let's start thinking of those. So I'm looking for factors of negative 30 that add to give me negative 7. So I can use 1 and 30, but I know no matter what the orientation of negatives and positives, that will not give me a 7. I can always think 2 and 15, but any combination of negatives is just going to result in a positive 13 or negative 13, so that doesn't work. So I would be drawn to looking at 10 times 3. Because I need a negative 7, it would have to be negative 10 and positive 3, because if I add negative 10 and positive 3, I'm going to get negative 7. So those work. So I'm going to start by breaking down negative 7x into negative 10x plus 3x, and I drop down the first and last term once again. I'm going to leave that 5 out for now and just bring it back in our last step. I then create two groups, and within each group, I pull out the common factor. So 2x squared minus 10x, well, there is a 2 and an x common to each, and that's going to leave me with x minus 5. And then in 3x minus 15, both are divisible by 3, so I'll pull out a positive 3 and be left with x minus 5. And because what I see in the brackets here is the same, that's a sign that we've done this well. So one of our factors is going to be x minus 5, or what is left over after we've taken out the greatest common factor in the last step. And the other factor comes from what we have common factored out. So 2x plus 3. And before we're done, we can't remember the first step we common factored out of 5, so there should still be a 5 outside those brackets. And these are the factors of 10x squared minus 35x minus 75.